All right, my friends, welcome to this episode. I have an unbelievable guest with me today. I'm so excited for you to meet him, listen to his stories. Kevin Montgomery, thank you so much for joining the show, my friend. I'm excited for this episode. So, Kevin, for the listeners, let's give a little backstory. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, okay. So I'm a 66-year-old gay man that that met my now husband 40 years ago. So it was way back when, and we met on a blind date, and he moved in 10 days later, and we've been together ever since. So that was kind of a wonderful love story. So that's that part. And then I was a kind of a what musical theater wannabe. I was a kid, an acting kid growing up, a musical guy, and so I had worked on that off and on. And my now husband, had a CPA firm, so he was very stable, and I was just trying to do my thing. So somehow I ended up in Vegas in kind of a bad lounge act, and was doing that. And I thought, I just, if this is success, I don't want this anymore. So I left and came back to LA, to where we live, and trying to figure out what I was going to do. So in 1 week, miraculously, three different sets of friends said, you should guys should have a baby. You should think about being parents. And the first one, I kind of went, yeah, thank you. That's very cute. The second one, I went, wow, okay, that's interesting. And the third one, I said, somebody is speaking to us. The universe at large has made some kind of request. So I knew that this was important. And somehow that third time, it ignited something in me. And I thought, I want this. I want a child. So we said, let's discuss it. And Dennis was a little more interested but hesitant. And so what we discussed it, and we said, okay, let's try it. So we decided we were going to go about trying to get as related to us as possible a child. So we went to his sister and asked for an egg, and she immediately said yes. And then we tried to figure out someone. She was a single and didn't have any kids, so it would be like giving away her firstborn. So we didn't want her to carry the baby.
Hmm.
So we decided we needed to find someone for that. So we kind of made all these lists and came up with one person, which was my 45-year-old cousin, and that lived in Oklahoma. So, and we called her, and she miraculously said yes. So through this whole process, through several IVFs, in 1993, our daughter Chelsea was born, and it's been a miracle ever since. It's the best thing we ever did. It's the greatest joy of our lives, and now she's 29 years old and married. So so that's the story. That's the background. That's how I ended up where I am right now. So yeah.
Kevin, there's so many directions to go with this. I absolutely, first and foremost, I
Yeah.
love this, and I'm
Oh,
so excited to dive into
thank
it.
you.
So when you said 40 years with, is it Dennis? Is that your husband?
Yes. Yes,
So then,
exactly.
and you said, and you were saying recently married. When did you two become married?
Ah, well, for us, 40 years recent is about 15 years ago.
Okay,
So
okay.
it was 2008, and it was that
Okay.
Chelsea was our daughter was 15 at the time, and she kept bugging us. She wanted us to get married, and we
Oh,
kept saying, we've been together so long, we don't care. It's like we don't need a government stamp.
yeah.
We just weren't kind of pushing for it. But for her, it was very important. And now I realize it, for her, it gave her a belonging. It made her family normal. It made her
Mm,
family like everyone else, and for her, it was very important. So there was a window in 2008 where the California Supreme Court said that we same-sex marriage could happen, but
mm,
there was a prop on the bill that was going to disallow it in November in 2008. So we had a window.
yeah.
So she said, if you're going to do it, you got to do it now. So in 6 weeks, we put together a lovely wedding, and
Oh,
that's when we got married. So and then Prop 8 happened, and it was, at that point, then it went into law that you couldn't be married, but they didn't know what to do with us. So
mm.
they said, well, we can't say you can't be married. They didn't know what to do. So anyway, so that was exactly when we were legally married, was in 2008.
Oh, I love that so much. So
Thanks.
when you said that, and this is three different individuals came to you and said you should have a baby, right?
Yes, yes.
And
Yes.
like, what time frame are we talking here? Like between the
Yeah.
first one and the third one?
It was all in 1 week.
Oh my
So it
goodness.
was yeah, so it was like maybe on a I don't know exact days, so I'm making this up as theater.
Yeah.
But, so maybe on a Tuesday, I think it was a guy that worked at Dennis's office, and he just said, "Oh my god, you guys have such a great relationship. You should be parents." And we kind of "Well, that's sweet," you know? And then maybe 2 days later, on maybe Thursday, let's say, somebody else said it, and that was kind of shocking. That was kind of weird. On I know it was on a Sunday. We were having a Sunday brunch at our house with these clients of ours, and it was this lady that had been a client since before I had known Dennis of his. And she was from South Africa, and she was kind of this kind of Auntie Mame sort of character. And she just slapped her hands down on the table and said, "Darling, this house needs a child."
Oh my goodness.
And so that was like it was like lightning bolts. It's like, okay, something is up. And I believe in all of kind of the universe
Yes.
and all of those spiritual kind of little beings like kind of
Yes.
supporting us. And so I said, this is a message. This is something. And not only that I logically thought something, I internally all of a sudden that
Mhm.
was like something that shot through me. And I said, this is something, I want to do. So
And that's where I was going to kind of go with this, because even when you telling the story, because I'm with you, I believe the
yeah,
universe, there's so many powers and stuff. Just you telling the story, like I
yeah.
feel it, right? I
Yeah.
can feel it.
Oh,
It's that charge, and I
I
call that
love
the
that.
truth, right? I always like that's the truth, and
Exactly.
it that way. So once that happened and that logical shift, like you said, was like, okay, that transition, then what was
Mhm,
like your thought process? Like, how did it
mhm.
move from that point?
Yeah. Well, so we were going on a trip. We were driving we have a house in Washington State. So we were on a driving trip maybe a week later. So we said, let's talk about it on the trip. So we were barely to like the valley, which is like 45 minutes. And I was like, Dennis, we need to talk about this. It's like, we need to talk about this. So I said, should we do this? And it was really pretty quick. And he just said, yeah, let's try it. So it was like very fast and on that trip. So when we got to the destination, that's when we said, let's call his sister. And we called her and she immediately said yes. The same day, we called my cousin and kind of laid it out and said, this is what we would like to do. And she immediately said yes. So that was, I think, the end of April. And we had our first attempt in June.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so it was the whole thing happened very, very quickly, and we had to put together all the players. Like I cold called UCLA and different places that had IVF clinics, and they were, well, we've never done this before. For a gay couple, we're not sure how this will work, but you have to find a doctor that's willing to do it. And I said, well, do you have any ideas or any recommendations? And they said, well, they gave me a list of a few people, and I called all those doctors and said, left messages basically. And one called me back almost immediately. They said, yeah, we're willing to do it. So I called UCLA back, and I said, I have a doctor. And they said, okay, if you have a doctor, they said, but we have to go by to our board to get approval, because they said at the time they were afraid they'd lose funding, because if the religious right got a hold of it, they might shut them down. So they said, you cannot go public, you cannot talk about this, but we would be willing to do it for you. So that started the process. So that was, maybe the 1st of May, and then it just took getting my cousin getting I mean, there was just processes like that we all had to go through psychoanalysts, to make sure that we're all sane. And my cousin and my sister-in-law had to go through doctors to make sure that it was viable and all that kind of stuff. So we had the first, then it was that was probably May, and then by June we had our first IVF transfer.
No, Kevin, what, man, I hear this and I'm just like, this is, it's hard for me to process things like
Mm,
that,
mm,
in the sense that it doesn't, it doesn't speak to my heart when I hear stories like that, because this is a
mm,
moment where you should be able to share this message with anybody in the world that you want to share it with,
right, right.
and you almost were being told by these
Hmm.
professionals that
Hmm.
you need to keep this under wrap while
Yeah,
working so hard to navigate all the parts,
sure,
right?
sure. I think I think it wasn't unusual for us. Listen, we grew up in a time, I mean, the 50s and 60s, when I didn't even know gay. I didn't want to be gay. If that was, although I knew something was up from the time I was very little. But so I think we were used to this you know, kind of dissension or kind of judgment. So I think it wasn't unusual for us. I think it just it was part of the process. I mean, and look, and it's like it's a glacier, this movement, and I have this internal kind of heartfelt feeling that we will eventually move all in a much more loving, kind way. But
Yeah.
I understand it's a process. And so, if I look back where we are now compared to where we were, lots of progress has been made, and now there's a lot of steps back. So
Yeah.
it is a journey. But I think the comfort I get is that I know myself, I know my husband, I know my kids. I have one daughter, and our son-in-law we call our kids.
Okay.
But and that's what's important. I know the hearts of the people that matter to me,
Yes.
and that's where I find comfort. So anybody outside can say whatever. I have a evangelical born again Christian sister that we've struggled with my entire life, that I've struggled our relationship, that has many judgments about who I am and what I'm going to do. So it's not unusual for me
Mm.
to have to deal with that kind of thing, and I understand it. But it's also, if I'm really going to be unconditionally loving, um, I really have to be unconditional with her. I realized I was judging her as harshly as she's judging me. So unconditionally loving goes across lines. Even I can't just sit in my righteousness and say, you should have to accept me. It's like I have to really, really be open and say that, allow them and say, and love them regardless. Yeah.
All right. All right, my friends. If right there, pause that section, rewind it, listen to
Yeah.
it again every single day, because this is such a key. I mean, for us
Yeah.
dads, like I hear that a lot, like, oh, I have unconditional love. I'm like,
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, but your actions
Right.
aren't matching that, right?
Yeah.
It's like it
Yeah.
is conditional if they perform in school or they perform in their sports or or they tell you they love you every day or they're not arguing with you. It's like those are the moments that really test your
Yeah.
conditions upon your love, right? Is it truly
Right.
unconditional or not? Um,
Right.
so with that, and I love this so much, when you okay, the day Chelsea's born. Tell me about that
Yeah.
experience.
Oh my God. Well, just a little bit about
Okay.
your thing about kids and unconditional. It's like they will give you the opportunity to test
Mm,
every one of of your tenets, of your beliefs, everything, which in such a good way, because it
mm,
really makes you question and understand yourself. You can't just say, this is who I am and I'm unconditionally loving and stuff like that. They're going to challenge to prove it,
yeah.
in their own little innocent way and just what their behaviors are. So I think that's so great. It's there's no other relationship that I think you have that potential of really knowing yourself.
It's
So I
it's almost as if they put a mirror in front of you too, because
absolutely
a lot of times they show behaviors, traits, and stuff that we are displaying constantly, and they're just parroting it, mirroring it. So it's like,
absolutely
so when we almost get frustrated, we have to stop and say, that's an attribute, a skill, or whatever I have that I need to deal
right,
with, right? A behavioral
exactly.
element. So
Yeah, exactly, and it's having that openness, which is really hard, that
mm,
self-reflection that can feel so punitive. It's like,
yeah.
not me, but it's wonderful because, it's something that, it's a being that you love more than you love anything that you've ever felt you could love, and they're giving you the feedback that
Mm.
you need, and it's really it's you gotta take it, and it's not always easy, but it's good. So that's just my aside. But what your question was about the day she was born,
Yes.
it was I mean, there's 2 days. The day that, because we had 3 attempts
Okay.
to have the IVF, and the first one didn't take, and we were devastated because we were just used to our life was whatever we wanted just kind of came, and we were given anything we wanted. We were kind of like, unconsciously, arrogant, and And so when it didn't happen, we were devastated. It was a very difficult day. And then we said, okay, we're going to do, we got to do one more. We had enough embryos that we could do another attempt without doing another egg retrieval. And then that one didn't happen. It was like, oh my God. And so my Dennis and my cousin were kind of waning, like, how many times are we going to do this? And so I just in my head just convinced, well, just one more time, just one more time. We had to get another egg retrieval and stuff. But in the back of my head, I thought, I'm just going to convince them one more time. And then if that doesn't work, I'm going to convince them one more time. But they didn't need to know that. They didn't have to know. So then the third attempt was in October. I remember October 15th was when she got pregnant, because we put it, you kind of know these days
Mhm.
exactly. Um, and when they came back within the 2 weeks or whatever it is, and she came back with her human growth hormone was off the charts.
Hmm.
That moment was like astounding for me. It's like I saw angels and choirs because I knew it was going to happen. So that was my first kind of miraculous moment. And then the second is obviously the day she was born, and we're all in the delivery room, my cousin, myself, and Dennis's sister, and we're all there, and the baby was born, and it was beyond. And I mean, and I think this is the most interesting part about it is, I think once we were pregnant, Dennis was a little bit like, oh dear Lord, what have we done? I'm not sure that I want this. He wasn't really a kid person. I'm more like kids and old people love me. He was more, he didn't know what to do with our nieces and nephews. He's like, and then he's like, why did I agree to this? And then we found out during the process, we wanted to know the gender. So we found out that she was a girl. And he then, once he's kind of accepted we were having a baby, it was like, I want the baby. I wanted a boy. I want an heir. He was doing all these kind of typically masculine, I want an heir. And so it was like shocking. And he actually went into a depression thinking, it's a girl. What am I going to do? I don't know. So he was going through all this tumult. And then even the day of the birth, went to work, and I went to the hospital, and they were inducing labor. And so I was there for quite a long time, and then her water broke, and I called him up and I said, you got to get down here. He said, I'm just going to do a little more work. And it's like, no, we're having a baby. You get down here now. It turned out to be a very long labor, but he came down to the hospital. So he was very reluctant.
Hmm.
So the baby came out, and I held her, and it was just, and my cousin, and we're all crying, and it was wonderful. And Dennis was kind of sitting back there, and the doctor said to him, Dennis, you can hold her. And he said, I can. And she said, yeah. So he took her, and he looked at me, and he said, can I feed her? And I said, yeah, of course. So he gave her the first bottle, and we actually have that picture. And I said it was like the Grinch, where his heart grew three sizes that day, two or three sizes, whatever. His life went from black and white to Technicolor. He was just smitten. He never
Hmm.
loved anything. So, and it has never changed. It is like that at 29 years old. He is still his baby, and she is the love of his life. I
Hmm.
wish I was, but whatever. But so I think that was the most interesting thing about the day she was born, was like how it affected him. I mean, he just it changed his life, and everything turned around, and it was just it was very miraculous.
Oh man. See, this is the stories. Like, I feel like this is exactly what people need to hear, in the sense of, not that everyone's birth story is going to be the same.
Yeah.
I mean, mine was very different. I have a acting background, so mine was
Hmm.
very thinking in the movie-esque moment, that like I was going to be, tears are coming out, and
Yes.
I would have been elated, and
Yeah.
doves are flying in the background, and it was
Yes.
opposite, because I wanted
Mhm.
kids for so long, and that moment
Yeah.
happened, and it was almost like, oh, like I hadn't processed it the other way,
Yeah.
like, oh. And I
Oh.
went into, like, is the house safe? Is every, and like total opposite, right? And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we brought our first son home, and I'm like
Yeah.
cleaning the house, and my wife jokes about it. She's like, you were just moving and moving things
Yeah.
around. And I was like, I was just in this like panic
Yeah.
state almost, you know?
Right, right. Well, because you're so responsible. It's the one
Oh,
thing, you like, I am responsible for another life. And that is, crazy. So I think you probably went into this protective dad mode, which you didn't. You thought, you were going to be directing a movie, and you ended up, like in the movie, kind of going like, "Oh my God, I'm playing the part of the protector." So it's but it's totally understandable because you become. There's nothing that will get in the way, and I say, it is the only relationship on the planet where you have the opportunity for instantaneous unconditional love. It's the only relationship, with spouses and family and friends, parents even. It's more conditional and it takes more time, and it still can be very unconditionally loving. But a kid is it's instantaneous. Just like you said, you immediately went into responsibility mode because you feel this love like you've never felt for anything in your life. And it's like, and I have to take care of them. So it's scary. It's like all in one, motion. You're like overwhelmed and scared. Yeah,
So do you
I
feel
get it.
like after Chelsea was born, do you feel you and Dennis had a great support group, or how did you feel like that went after?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, we expected, we discussed it before we actually started the process. We said, is this really right? Are we, because this kid's going to have a lot of judgment, having two gay dads and stuff like this. So should we really do this? And then we kind of thought, well, every kid has a challenge. They're all different, but
Yeah.
every kid has a challenge. And I said, this will be her challenge. So we'll have to see. So we kind of anticipated 50% of the people were going to have a problem. So we just kind of decided that's what we were going to have to deal with. But amazingly, from our family on out, people were astounded. Like we would tell them the story of how we had her, and we had people crying. Flight attendants were just like showering us with gifts and flowers, and it was so the opposite of what we really thought. And so literally there were very few people. There were instances that we
Mhm.
had mostly religious people that had problems. Dennis had, I know, shouldn't it should religion be a little more loving? But I don't know.
Right. Just
Yeah, I
saying.
know. Just saying. I mean, I don't know. I thought that's what it was set up for, but that's okay. Not
Yeah.
who
We
do
have
what
it
do I
wrong.
know?
I don't know. We'll figure
Yeah.
it out
Oh
one
yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Whatever.
day.
So but we had some clients leave because said I can't deal with this and blah blah blah. So we had that, but I have to say for the most part from our families that just thought it was the second coming, because I mean my dad in particular, who had a little trouble with me coming out, then thought it was a shame because I wasn't going to have kids. When I finally
Mhm.
had a kid, he thought, okay, this is Jesus, for God's sakes. It's like he was just overwhelmed because it's like it was just like the miracle baby. So we did literally have so much support and so much love. We always felt buoyed and held up. And when I mean, we live in Malibu, California, so
Mhm.
it's not a bastion of
Sure.
right-wing ideology. So like when we went to the Malibu Jewish Center for preschool, they were just they loved us. Everybody was very open. It's like, it's a much more liberal area. But we really did feel that we had quite the support and quite the love. Yeah, it was wonderful.
That's so good. So
Yeah,
now so we're gonna switch it a little bit. What have
yeah,
been some of the hardest challenges you think as a dad raising Chelsea? What have been some of those moments that you're like, this is such a challenge?
yeah. Well, I think that parenting is universal. That's what we've learned by this. If you're a parent, it is exactly the same, issues for every single parent on the planet. And we can prove that because we're different parents and we had the same one. So our issues were, she wouldn't give up her pacifier. It's like, oh my God, she's going to become Jeffrey Dahmer. I cannot take the pacifier out of her mouth. It's like, what is going on? The discipline issues. And it's like,
Wow.
I'm the discipline, I'm the hard disciplinarian.
Really?
And Dennis, oh dear Lord, yes, I am like the tough guy. And Dennis is the indulgent daddy's girl, he'll give her anything. So it was a good balance, but it was those things like the questioning of am I doing the right thing? What do we do? From what food do we feed her to how do you sleep her? She would come and get in our bed for a very long time. Should and every there's an opinion about every single thing where people say yes, no, and all that kind of stuff. And so finally, I kind of came up with, why is there not one book?
Mm.
Why is there not one book that can just tell you what to do? Because I think that was the hardest thing. What do we do? I don't know. You're questioning everything. And then I realized every kid is different and every parent is different. So there's no way to say this is how it has to go, because it depends on who's the players. So
Mhm.
you can't have one book because every kid has a different issue. If you look in one family with multiple kids, which I'm sure you understand, they're very different. And
Mhm.
so they sometimes they need to be dealt with differently. So, but I think that was the biggest challenge. I mean, I think as when she was young, that was, what do we do? That's just like, what do we do? And take that book, what do you expect the first year, throw that out, because
Mhm.
oh my god, it was like she didn't turn over at 6 months. I thought, oh dear god, she it's like I thought something's wrong with her, something, she's not okay. So it because kids don't follow that. It's
Yeah.
like what Einstein didn't speak till he's 3 years old, so you don't
Yes.
know, you don't know. So I think that was the biggest challenge when she was younger. I think when she got older, I mean, which the challenges get more intense because,
Mm.
she's going through teenage years and what she goes through and her rejections and her, and she didn't act out a lot. I mean, she never did kind of the big separation, rebellion thing. So we didn't have that to deal with. But I also think it was the outside world was hard for her and for us when all the Prop 8 stuff happened. So then that was like, why are they against me? Chelsea just felt very like,
Oh.
why are people attacking my family? So I think those were the biggest challenges. But I mean, discipline, I think number one is the
Mhm.
hardest thing. What to do? How strong? What do you have to do? So, but I think that was the biggest challenge. Yeah.
And isn't it so funny, Kevin, when we do discipline, we feel bad.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
the children, I genuinely believe it's not that they need discipline, but it's like they're looking for us to be like, "No,
Yeah.
that's not okay," sometimes. They're
Yeah.
looking for us to guide them, right? And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
like it's I remember every time, like, I'll go and I'll be like, "Man, that just it hurt me
Sucks.
more than
Yeah.
it bothered my kids," you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because, I feel like, they need to be guided. They need boundaries, because
Yes.
otherwise, if you're not in control, they're going, I guess I'm in control, and it's too
Yeah.
scary for them. So when she was really young, there was, I think it was just on a radio show, I heard this wonderful kind of interview, and this guy, a child psychologist or something, was saying, the scenario of, say that you have your kid and you take them to an empty basketball arena, and you tell them you can play anywhere in the seats. There may be three or four. You play anywhere in the seats, but do not cross that line onto the court. That's the only rule. Do not cross the line onto the court. So he said a 3 or 4 year old, what they're going to do, immediately go right down to that line, look back at you, make sure you're watching, and step over it to see what you're going to do. And if you don't do something, they will never trust you.
Mm.
So it's like, because you did not follow through. So I think, that was really good advice, because when I drew a line, like you said, it's so horrible most of the time. But if you drew a line, I kept it. I never, and sometimes I was the one crying in bed because, like, why did I draw the line there? Why am I putting my kid through this? But it was so important, I felt, for her to understand that I'm taking care of her. Even if it's a discipline, I'm taking care of you. I'm guiding you, you know? And so it's a huge challenge, the discipline thing, but they do need it. They need those boundaries, because otherwise they don't know what's going on.
Mm, absolutely. So, I got a little notification. I'm gonna edit this section out,
Yeah,
but I got
yeah.
a little notification. It was like 10 minutes left. So we're gonna
Okay.
just switch over really quick.
Yeah.
I think it's because we're just having such great conversations, Kevin. I love this.
Sure.
But what I
Absolutely.
want to do is I want to ask you one of these questions because I think it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna hold them up and randomly you just tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. Right here. There's been
Okay.
no card manipulation, my friends. So,
Yeah.
um,
You did get my note about I want that card, right?
oh my gosh, are you ready for this? Is oh my
Okay.
gosh, you're gonna love this one.
Okay.
So I'm gonna
Okay.
do it to you here, and then I'm gonna read it
Oh,
out.
oh dear Lord.
I
Okay.
know,
Yeah. Let's do
but I
it.
think
No,
this
this
is
is good.
important that dads don't talk about
Yeah.
a lot, right? So,
Yeah.
how has your sex life changed since becoming a dad?
Well, it's gotten better since she's an adult, but
I love that.
you know, but
Yes.
before it was pretty intense. I mean, it's you're
Yeah.
first of all, you're exhausted,
Mhm.
so then even if you have time or have privacy, it's hard to feel like, oh, I just want to go to sleep. So that, so there's that
Absolutely.
element. But it became much more structured. We had when she was 3 years. This may be more information than you need,
Oh,
but when she was 3 years old, we were just kind of at each other because we're not going to take it out on her, but we were so tired and stressed. We were kind of at each other. So we said, we need some help. So we went to this amazing therapist. So she set us up and said, first of all, you have to have one night for yourselves. You have to have a date night.
yes.
And it was the greatest advice. So from that point on, we had one night a week where we would go out, and then actually we had this wonderful kind of part-time nanny that would stay over on Friday nights and take care of Chelsea. So we had Friday night, date night, all the way to Saturday morning. So we had all that time.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was crucial for us because you forget your relationship. Your kid becomes everything and you forget each other. So we had to manipulate the situation so that we had time, for to have, to be intimate and have those kind of things, because you don't want to forget your partner. I mean, they're so important to number one, to each other, but it's so important for your child to see it as an example of what a loving relationship is. So you need to honor each other and have time for each other and celebrate that. So
That
it
is
did, but now it's like, yeah, now we're old and free. So
You're all, you got grown babies. You're good to go now.
yeah, you're good to go. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
love that so much. One of
yeah,
the final question I like to ask
sure.
is when Chelsea looks back, because I think about this when I've passed and when you and Dennis have passed, what do you want Chelsea to remember most about you as a dad?
Mm. That she was loved, unconditional love, that no one could have cared or loved for her more. It's like, I think that's, you want those feely things. That's what, I was watching some TV show last night and they were just talking about, it doesn't matter about anything. It's like, what it's your relationships and how you feel. So I think that's what I would want her to take. I would want her to take an impression of that I loved her, you
Yes.
know, so much, and that she was always loved and supported. And I think that's what I would love for her. That would be the memory I would hope that she had. Yeah.
Kevin, thank you so much for not only sharing these amazing stories, being vulnerable, opening up, helping the audience that's going to listen to this, the dads that are going to be able to relate to you, to your story, and helping them
Yeah.
feel like they have someone in their community now they can just listen to and resonate with. So I appreciate you so much for coming on this show. It's been an honor and it's been very fun connecting with you.
Oh, Thomas, you're just the best. I had the best time. You're such a sweet soul, and it's been a joy. So I really appreciate it, and I'm honored that you asked me to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Good. I just wanted because it was the whole little timer was coming down. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just wanted to make sure that we got the full episode.
yeah.
And like I was surprised, usually it just like sometimes it's like, oh man, this episode,
I
like
know.
we're gonna take it. This one, I was like, I could just keep going and chatting with you.
It's
But
wonderful.
I
Oh,
love seriously, I love your story. Like I
thank
really
you.
hope, I mean, Katie talks so highly of your daughter, of you,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like I really hope that our paths cross someday, where we can
yeah.
sit
No.
down, enjoy a meal, like chat, hang out.
Absolutely.
It'd be
We
so
instantly
much.
felt that connection with Katie, and
Yeah.
I knew we would relate, because I mean she related your love story, which was just so sweet and wonderful, and how you guys got together, and I knew we would connect, and I truly feel it. So I know that we're going to somehow, make sure that we continue and be, and be friends and get together.
Yes, hopefully in Malibu, not Salt Lake. Malibu seems way better and more enjoyable.
Yeah. Although Salt Lake is beautiful and
It
clean.
is. It is. It is very
Yeah,
beautiful for sure. But
yeah,
but
yeah,
there's the audience in Salt Lake
yeah.
is
It's
a little
different.
different. So,
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, yeah. But anytime, come to Malibu. We're out here.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be great. Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been lovely.
Okay.
Seriously.
Thanks, Thomas. So good. So
Yeah.
nice to meet you. Thanks so
Nice to
much.
meet you. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.